Okay, so here we are down in my basement, and I'm getting ready to do a water change. If you watched one of my previous videos on my sump filtration system, I explained, or you saw, how I have this extra utility tank next to my sump, and this tank is plumbed into the sump, so it gets water from the sump and it just flows into this tank, and then the overflow flows back into the sump. And I use this extra utility tank to do my water changes. I mean, there's other things I do with it also, but the main purpose is to make unbelievably super easy water changes. I start with this bucket filled with deionized water that I have had a heater in. I did this a few days ago to get it ready. I fill it up with my DI filter system, put the heater in, and then add the salt mixture to the salt content I want to get it to, and it's all ready to go for my water change. I'm going to walk you over to the DI filter now, so you just take a look at what that looks like. Alright, that is my DI filter system that I bought. You can obviously go to the store and buy deionized water, but it is in the long run $1,000,000% cheaper to spend $100 to $150 on one of these and hook it up to your sink. Like down in my basement, I have it hooked up to this line right above my utility sink, and it feeds into this part. Goes across to the second stage of the filter, and then I pull down this hose into the buckets that I'm filling, turn on this valve, and fill up whatever I want to with the deionized water. Okay, now we're going to go back over to the sump area. Okay, now we are ready to actually do the water change. This is about the simplest way on the planet that I could think of to do a water change. I know not everyone out there will be able to have this particular kind of extra tank and setup to do this, but I'm going to explain to you what I have and what I need real simple. It may not even 10 minutes to do the water change. So what you're looking down here is my pre-mixed return water in that bucket. It is deionized water that I put the heater in for the last day and a half or so to get it to the proper temperature, and then I added salt. So it is ready to be put into the tank. That's the fresh water. Over here, I just have a bucket and a siphon hose. What I do is I do it the old-fashioned way. I suck the water through the siphon hose and fill enough of those buckets until this tank is almost empty. Simple as that. I siphon this extra tank out into this bucket, dump it in the utility sink I have down here, and I do that as many times as it takes to almost empty this utility tank. As far as shutting off the water to this utility tank, that's the first thing I do. I'll go over here. As you see, as I showed before, this is the plumbing. This is the drain into the sump, and this is return from the sump, so it just is some extra water. I just go over to here to where my plugs are, and I unplug the pump that pumps the water into that extra tank, and that'll cut off the flow, and I can work in that tank. Okay, now what I've done is unplug the pump to this fish tank. So basically this is disconnected from the sump now, because there's no water flow going back and forth. I can empty this tank down almost to the bottom by just siphoning it through that hose into that bucket and then dumping it in the sink. So I'm going to do that right now and then come back to the video when it is ready to be refilled. Okay, so I have siphoned most of the water, it's down to there, out of this utility tank I have next to my sump. Again, what I did was I unplugged the pump from the sump that pumps water into this, so it is basically disconnected now. It's a completely separate fish tank. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pre-prepared saltwater mixture that's heated to the proper temperature and pump it back into this tank until this tank is filled up to the overflow level. When I'm done with that, I'm going to turn the pump back on, and that'll slowly pump the water, the new water I put into this tank, into the sump. And then that'll slowly mix it back up into the main tank. That way you're not directly putting new water into your fish tank. It's more of a chance of giving your corals, your plants, your fish a little bit of a shock if you're just dumping some different water right on them. This slowly mixes the water back in the tank. I think this is the best way to do it if you have the ability to have this kind of setup. And it's super easy. It just took me about 3 or 4 minutes to empty this tank. It's going to probably take about 5 minutes to refill it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this spare pump I have hooked up to this hose right here. I'm going to stick the pump into the water, put the hose into the tank, and plug it in. Right over here, I have a plug. Let me see if I can do this with one hand. Unplug that and plug in the pump. Hold on for a second. And there we go. So now we have the pump pumping water and refilling the tank. Again, this is pumping the prepared water. I filled this a couple days ago with my DI filter. Put a heater in it to get it up to temperature, and then mixed the salt in, and it was ready to go. So I'm going to kind of summarize and try to make this simple while this tank is refilling. To start off, what I have and what I explained in my sump filtration video is there's my sump. I have this extra tank. This is the overflow from that extra tank, and it drains down that pipe into the sump. This line is the return from the sump, and it's just an extra tank with a constant flow in and out of the sump. What I did was just using a bucket, a siphon hose, and another bucket full of prepared water, do my water change. Siphoned out the water from this extra tank into the bucket, dumped it in the sink. Did that a few times until the water level was almost empty, the tank was almost empty, and then threw the pump in there into the bucket with the new water, and I'm currently pumping that back into the tank. Once that is full, I'll turn the pump back on, and it'll recirculate slowly the new water back into the fish tank, and that will be my water change. All right, thank you, and stay tuned for more videos. Any questions, just give me a message.